want to take a few moments and show you how I edited this photo from Scotland into something a little bit more vibrant. So I'm just going to run through my editing process here. The first thing I always do is I'm in the develop module of Lightroom and I work my way down through the basic panel, but that's not entirely true because I almost always skip the white balance unless there's some major correction that needs to happen. If white balance was completely off, I shot it on something wrong, or the camera got it really incorrect. But in this case, it's pretty close. And so for now, I'm going to leave those as is. Now you can see that this image is dark, very dark. And here's one version of the edited. Here's another version of the edited. In both those cases, it's much brighter. The actual day looked something a little bit more like this to my eyes, but I intentionally shot it dark because I wanted to try to preserve as much detail in the sky as possible. If I had shot it with the landscape exposed nicely, the sky, the detail would have been lost. It's so very easy to lose highlight detail. So I intentionally underexposed. Sony cameras, that's pretty easy to do. Nikon as well. Canon, you want to be a little bit more careful. This may have been a scene where you might want to think about bracketing, shooting multiple exposures, one for the landscape, one for the sky, and then merging those. But I shot just one, and now we're going to start our editing. So I'll come down to the exposure, and the first thing I need to do is, as I said, brighten it up. I'm just going to start, I'm hovering over the exposure slider using my up arrow key, watching my histogram to make sure that I'm not going to run off the side, and kind of get the landscape in an area where it's better. Now the sky is getting bright, I'm starting to lose that detail, so at some point I'm going to stop, probably right around, actually right around there looks pretty good because I'm also watching things like the lighthouse itself and just that sky detail. Contrast, I almost always add just a little bit of contrast right away. Now highlights, I'm going to start to bring this down to the left, try to get some of that sky back. I don't like to move these. You've heard me say this before. Look, it brings the sky all the way back, but you flatten out some of the contrast. And so if you find yourself moving a highlight or a shadows all the way to plus or minus 100, I think you're better off backing off and then using local adjustments, which we'll get to in a minute. So I'm going to kind of pick a middle ground, somewhere around 50-ish. Seems pretty good. I still have some good detail in the sky. Shadows, I am going to bring that up. But again, at a point of past 50, I feel like this starts to look kind of flat. Do you see that? There's not much detail in there. I don't want to bring it up that much. Somewhere around there to preserve some of that detail. Whites, I almost always bring to the right until I hit my edge. Up here on the histogram, up here on the histogram, I'm just going to bring it over a little bit more. Very close to the edge, not quite on. And black, same thing. My goal as I work my way down through this basic panel is to stretch the histogram from the darks to the brights so that I have the full tonal range. That, I think, gives you the best look. All right. This looks pretty decent. I'll add a little bit of clarity. I'll pump up the vibrance just a little bit and hit that before. And it's showing you actually an edited version from before. So we can't get that dark version, but one of the things that we can't get the dark version. So that's all good. Now we need to kind of take it to the next level with local area adjustments. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my gradient tool and I'm going to put this on highlights. And I'm going to drag down. This is going to help me fix the sky. So this is how, instead of just dragging your highlight slider all the way down, this is how you can kind of, you can control an area separately from the rest of the image. Those of you who have been working with me for a while, you know this, you've heard this. So I can bring the highlights down some more, but I can also just bring the exposure down. Let's be drastic just for a minute so you can really see the power of the gradient. I love these gradients. They hide them, the fade out hides themselves so well. Quick recap, as I drag down, everything above the line is 100% effect. So 100% minus 1.18 exposure, minus 24 highlights. From here to here, it fades to 50% effect. And from here to the bottom line, it fades from 50 to 0. So right here at this bottom line, none of this effect is applied, but above it, gradually increasing. And you can, of course, control the distance that takes to fade out. You can make it a very hard, sharp. You can also flip it around And if you want to rotate these gradients, grab them out at the edge. It's much easier. If you try to grab them in here, it becomes very twitchy and it's hard to control it. So I'm going to do what I said. Come out here, get back to that kind of horizon line, make it a little bit more gradual, and that looks pretty good. I like that. Now, I want that sky, it had touches of blue in it. I want it to feel bluer. I'm going to bring the exposure back up. It's a little dramatic, but I will increase the contrast. And I'm also going to increase the clarity a little bit and the dehaze a little. Dehaze can have a nice effect on the sky. So you see it's really bringing out some information. It's also bringing out some dust spots that were on my sensor because I shot this at f7 actually, which is a little sad that we're seeing dust spots, but that's what we got. All right, so I'm going to continue to bring it down a little bit. And you say, hey, Toby, what about the lighthouse? You're making it dark. Well, we'll fix that in a minute. But come back. I said I wanted to make it a little bit bluer, so I'm going to change the white balance and get a little bit more blue in the sky. So we've got some really nice detail in there. Want to see what it looked like before I did this? That's what it looked like. Now that's what it looks like. So all that detail was hiding in there. We got to fix this right here. And you know what? I think I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm going to crop in past that in a minute. So we have this brush tool. This brush tool is within the linear gradient. Oh, we can close those. And it has several brush sizes that you can set. An A size, a B size, and an erase, which will take away this gradient. Also, if you ever want to see the gradient presented to you, if it's hard to see your effect because it's very subtle, your settings here, you hit the O key and it'll overlay it with red and you can see how it fades out. So we're going to leave that on for a second and I'm going to use the erase key to erase on the lighthouse. Now, I'm going to hit the Z key because I want to zoom in, use the little navigator to get in close. I could even go 2 to 1. If you are working precisely, zoom in. Don't make it hard for yourself. So now I can make my eraser a little bit larger, and it's important to note that I have auto mask turned on. This will be smart enough where if I start inside the lighthouse, look how, well, it's making me a liar. It shouldn't, unless you do a really bad job, go outside the edge. As long as I keep most of the brush inside, yeah, okay, I was a little too excited about using the eraser brush. See how it's keeping it in? Now it's kind of hard to see because the brick has a reddish tone to it, but I'm erasing it nicely from the lighthouse. It gets a little tricky up here with all of this, but I think we'll be okay. We might have to paint some of that back in. And you know what, we don't need it on this white building here either. So let's take a moment, see a little car hiding back there too. So I'm just taking a moment to erase. Look how it's staying on the chimneys. There we go. Hitting the Z key zooms us back out. Hitting the O key turns that overlay back off. And let's sit done for a second so the gradient goes away. Not bad. Not bad at all. A little bit up here. So let's go back. Get that gradient turned back on. Here it is. And I have to hover over the screen. I'm going to have to zoom out for a second. Find the dot so it knows. Let's do the O again as well. So I know what gradient I'm working on. I'm going to get the brush tool. This gradient selected, so this is what I'm modifying. And I'm going to brush this gradient back on. I'm going to adjust my flow a little bit here. And I think I'm going to turn auto mask off. It's not going to work very good in this. My goal is to just kind of paint back a little bit of the effect between the bars, really. It just looked a little unnatural up there, and maybe even a little bit in the window, because we're seeing through there to the sky. We don't want it to be necessarily too bright. Maybe a little right there and there, and a tiny bit right there. Let's see how that looked. Still got a little bit of a glow cap to it. So I would go back and fix that. But in the interest of keeping this a little bit shorter, let's say we're done with that one for now. Now, the landscape. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab my gradient tool. I'm going to drag up from the bottom this time. And notice that I don't care what my settings are when I first lay the gradient down. I'll change that in a minute. Now I can come over here, and in this case it's the shadows that I want to adjust. There. It popped to its default of 23, I think, and it's just made those a little bit brighter. Let's keep those blacks turned down though. We want good contrast in there. I want it to be brighter, but have that tonal range, so we have a full blacks in there. I want the clarity to pop up too. I really want these rocks. I love the texture differences between the rocks and the landscape. And I want to bump the saturation up of this land. I want to bring out these colors in the rocks, the colors in the grass, the colors in the water. That all looks pretty good to me. I might bring the whites up. I want the white part of the water to be a little bit whiter as well. And overall exposure, let's increase it of this landscape here. I think that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to crop. It's up to you about what time you crop. Sometimes I crop right away. Sometimes I work on an image for a while before I realize that there's parts of it that aren't working for me. And in this case, I want to keep this aspect ratio, so the little lock here. And I'm just going to bring this in just a little bit, maybe more than a little bit. Let's see, can we come in right here? How does it look? I might come in just a little bit more. What I'm watching here is I'm not sure I like these big rocks jutting in. I think I want to get rid of them, so I'll come in just a tiny bit more. And I feel like we've got a nice kind of rule of thirds here. We've got this leading section of rocks that bring our eyes up, across here, and out to sea, with a nice little bit of space here. That all looks pretty good. All right, let's get the color of this water. Look, see that hint of color right in there? I want to pull that out and see that more in all of this water here. A couple different ways we could do that. So far, to affect an area of the image, we've used the graduated filter. You also have the radial filter. You could draw a big circle over this, but then you have the brush. Now, don't confuse this with the editing brush for the gradients. This is its own brush that you can just brush an effect on. In this case, let's go to temperature. Let's green it a little bit, and I think we're going to brighten it a little, highlights a little. So in this case, I am changing things first, clarity and saturation. Now, this brush has those very same settings. I don't care about auto mask. If you don't need it to be on, I would have it turned off because it certainly slows down the functioning of Lightroom to try to figure out where your edges are. I made it bigger by using the bracket keys. You can also just drag this, and you can change the feathering as well. Mine doesn't need to be feathered quite so much. The flow, I'm going to put up somewhere around 60-70%. So this means that it's going to apply these effects up here at 65. So I've made my brush too big. So I'm just going to brush on in here. And again, natural stuff really can take colors and changes without giving away the fact that it's been a bit edited, although this color I'm ending up with is not quite the direction I wanted to go. So now that that's been laid down, I'm going to go up here and change and see what happens as I bring this temperature back more towards the yellow. There we go. This is getting more of that green I wanted, and let's go back under tint, a little bit more greenish. Looks pretty good. I like this. This looks nice. I'm going to hit the O key just to make sure that I've done a pretty good job of applying that evenly. And from here, I can hold down the Alt key to get into the eraser. Whatever settings I have for the eraser will automatically apply. So let's go over to the eraser for a second. Let's make its size even more, and let's decrease its feathering. Let's go back to A. Now when I hit the Alt key again, it's that exact size. Let's take it off this rock here. And maybe over here a little bit. We don't quite need it on that stuff. I've got some other plans for that. Maybe a little bit over there. All right, let's hit O to take that off and look back at our water. Pretty happy with that. I'm curious to play around with the clarity a little bit. If we go down on the clarity on this water, it really will soften it. Maybe sharpness too. What happens? Does it give us this more kind of ethereal motion feel, or do we like a high amount of clarity? I think you can go either way. I'm going to keep it for now up a little bit higher. I'll set to sharpness again as well. And let's bump saturation up a little bit more. I'm very careful with saturation on a whole scale image, but individual areas can certainly be increased and decreased in their saturation. So I'm pretty happy with that. This looks good. Now, my memory is this grass was a good bit greener than this. We've got this kind of a little bit of yellow stuff up here. I want better green grass. So I'm going to go to new, still on my brush, and I just want to go to temp, and that kind of resets everything. You can also double click on any of these and reset. So right now I'm brushing nothing on. I'm brushing a brush on, but it has no effect. So we could do that. We now have two different brushes on here. The dot represents the one, this dot represents the other one, and when you hover over there for a second, you get that O, or the red that you can also get by hitting O. So let's take our tint down towards green to green that up a little and bring our saturation up of that grass just a little bit there. Let's see if we come over to blue a little bit and see if we can get that to green up a little bit more. I think I've gone into the realm of, I don't really, well, up here it looks pretty good. So I'm just brushing on in those areas where I really want that green to come through. I don't love it out here. This wasn't grass. This was this kind of rock lichen stuff, and it's just not really doing it for me. But the grass is closer to it. So I'm just going to hit that erase key, and I'm going to use the bracket to get it bigger. Just kind of take it off that area. That's just going to kind of stay that rocky yellow for now. That'll be fine. Maybe I'll bring it back a little bit. And my tool, my brush dot, even though I've erased it from here, still starts where I originally started. So that's all right. I'm going to bring that tint back a little bit and the saturation back down a little. I want this to look a little bit more realistic, and I also feel like it's bleeded into the rocks a little bit more, so I'm just going to kind of take it off that. Oh, I am on the erase key. Sorry, I was just painting it on. Holding down the Alt gives you the other brush. So if you're on the erase and you want to brush it back, the Alt. If you're on the brush and you want to erase it, the Alt. So there we go. I'm being a little bit more cautious in there. Looks pretty good. One more brush, a little bit more clarity. And you can grab clarity from the drop down, or you can just come down and move clarity up. And I'm just going to work over some of these rocks here. There's just some really cool detail. I really want those to pop and be a nice contrast to that smooth water. Even though we bumped up the clarity on the water, it still has that very smooth feeling to it. And I think that's a bit nicer. Now the last thing I'm going to do before I say I'm happy with this is remove those dust spots. So that is actually there's two things I'm going to do with the spot removal tool. This is a spot removal tool. And I'm going to say heal. Heal will be smart enough to kind of sample from the area around it. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots easily. I'm going to come over to my visualize spots, and that's going to give me this look. So you can see now a few more. There's those and those over here. Now if you don't really see them, it's not too big a deal. I'm going to make my brush size just a little bit bigger than the spots I need to heal. Click, it's going to automatically sample from someplace else. Let's take visualize spots back off. It's always kind of important to see how well did it do. You don't want it to sample from someplace really stupid and give you a weird look. So I'm just going to kind of do each of these real quick. And over here, as I said, we didn't really see these, but let's go ahead, and there's one right here too. Make sure that if I was going to print this later and some sharpening got applied more so, then that could be a little messy. Let's come back here a second. Did you notice that one? It's sampled from this over here and pulled in such a way that it didn't do the best job. So you can fix that. I'm just going to bring it over here and say this is a little bit more similar to what you should be pulling from. That feels better to me. That's hidden. Now the other thing that I want to do, this cable, some kind of radio line antenna, just stretches off to nowhere since I've edited that. So I want to grab this, and we do have some funny edges to this thing, but we're in at 2:1. I'm not going to worry about that. And I'm going to come in, and I'm going to leave it on heel as well. Clone, though, again, will give me an exact duplicate. I want to click real close, and I'm just going to click and drag along this line all the way over here, and I should have moved it so I could see everything at once. I need to be right there. That gives me edge to edge. And let's just come in like that. And let's come up like this. I did a pretty sloppy job. Now this is important right here. Yep, it did a good job of sampling at the same height. So sometimes it'll be off a little bit, and in a straight line, you'll get a jump. I see a little bit of a fuzz there, a little bit of a blur. And we also have that right there as well. I will fix that in just a second. Let's come down on this one. Right close to the edge. And now let's use the clone, because I don't want it to try to do that bleed that we ended up with up here. So I'm going to come up right here, and I'm going to come down to the bottom. And this is what I was talking about, where you want to make sure you match the line just right. It's a little rough. Maybe we'll try heel. Because of that slant of the lighthouse. There we go. We need to carefully match that up. That's better. Now, I would fix this when I was taking a little bit longer, just to adjust it a little bit more. Let's fix that up at the top there. This truthfully, what we should do is we should delete that. Here's what I'll do, just in the interest of time. I'm going to try to fix just the part that comes right up. Let's go in even closer. This is a great example of when you're working at a detailed level, take the time, get all the way in there. That's some serious chromatic aberration we have around there after we've edited now. And make that change. So you can see it kind of disappears right there. So we might be able to get away with getting rid of this feathering. So a very low level of feathering, and dragging from right there. Let's see if we can get away with no bleed. Just the faintest bleed. So let's see what that looks like. Nice. And then of course finishing that up there and fixing that right there. We got some green that ended up there as well. So that was a walkthrough of editing this image that I've wanted to share with you all for quite some time. If you got any questions, of course, post them in the group under this video so we can all learn. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.